Today I'm trying several new things with a recipe. First and foremost, I'm using some barley flour. I don't know if you can tell, but it has a very grainy appearance. Let me get a scoop and show you what it looks like a little bit more up close. So it's a little bit darker than regular flour, and it has this almost sandy consistency. So the recipe that I'm using from the Bob's Red Mill Whole Grain Baking Cookbook calls for barley in it. It's a apple pie barley pound cake. In addition to the lovely barley you see here, I'm adding a little bit of coconut flour, and I'm also substituting low-fat yogurt, low-fat plain yogurt actually, for the butter in the recipe. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm trying to cut saturated fats in my diet and lose a little bit of weight. By the way, if you're looking for a source for barley flour, you can get it from our friends at King Arthur Flour, and they have it in an organic variety. Now that I have all the dry ingredients together, which includes all the flour, all the different flours, all the different spices, which include nutmeg and cinnamon. If I had mace, I'd use mace, but I used just a little bit more nutmeg. And a teaspoon of ginger is really going to have a little zing to it. But it's a lot of flour. It's a lot of different kinds of flour. So I'm looking forward to tasting this. I'm very surprised that this recipe doesn't call for any vanilla. Most baking recipes, most cake recipes call for some vanilla, but this does not. So what I'm doing now is I'm whisking up the flours with the baking soda. By the way, it has a lot of baking soda, I guess because it doesn't have any baking powder in it. Spices and salt. Once this is whisked up, I'm going to cream together, although I'm not really sure how one creams together eggs and yogurt, but I guess I'm going to find out. Although I think it's the the yogurt and the agave nectar first. So it should be an interesting little cake journey, because most of the flours that I'm using here absorb a lot of liquid, so it should work out pretty well. Between the coconut flour and the barley flour, it really has quite a sandy texture to it, and it looks even sandier now because the spices have been added to it. But I've whisked it up quite a bit and added a lot of air to the flour mixture. And now I'm going to get started on the wet ingredients. Okay, it's time to make an important distinction in the fat replacement of this recipe. First we have our butter. The original recipe calls for 1 stick of butter, and 1 stick of butter is 88 grams of fat, and that would be 56 grams of saturated fat for the entire cake. On the other hand, we have our plain low-fat yogurt, and the serving size is 1 cup. We're actually going to use a half a cup because that's what a stick of butter equals. So a half a cup is 1.5, 1.5 grams of total fat in this recipe, and 1 gram of saturated fat. No, that's not counting our eggs, because we are going to have 2 eggs in this recipe, but I just wanted to make a distinction between the butter and the yogurt substitution. Who knows how the cake's going to come out, but I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, this isn't the prettiest mixture, but it is the yogurt and the agave, and I'm going to blend this together until well mixed. I'm sure there's only just so far you can go to mix these two together, because there's going to be some separation. Then I'm going to break the eggs in one at a time, and I'll check back in with you after the eggs are added. Here we are with our fluffy egg mixture, and now the recipe calls for adding a little bit of the flour and then a little bit of the applesauce alternately. So I guess we will start with the flour and get the whisk out of the way. I think it says start with 1/3 of the flour, but I see it. Whoops. Well, that's not quite 1/3. That's closer. All right. Lock this down and mix. So when this gets incorporated, I'm going to mix in a bit of the applesauce. So while it says it's an apple pie, it's an applesauce pie cake, if it could be that. I've added all the ingredients, and now I'm just beating it until it's smooth, as requested by the recipe. Probably another minute, not much more than that. And I have to say, it smells every bit the same as a really good apple pie with spices. So if it smells good, that's 2 out of the 3 rules that my grandfather always said. If it smells good and it looks good, it probably tastes good. Well, doesn't that look pretty? I was really worried about this cake being quite a wet batter, but I have to tell you, the flours did their magic and absorbed a lot of the liquid already, so I can only imagine that it's going to come out all right. The recipe says to bake the cake at 375 degrees for an hour and 15 minutes. I'm guessing that because I'm using agave nectar, I'm going to knock it down about 25 degrees, and it probably will take around an hour to bake. But we'll check in about halfway through and give the cake a turn. This is one of my favorite things to do, is check cakes, pies, and cookies and everything halfway through. You know, and I apologize for the state of the oven. It really does need a cleaning. Alright, so here we are at the 30-minute mark, and boy is that pretty. That's just wonderful. So I'm giving it a gentle turn, and I'm going to put it back in, and we'll probably set the timer for another, let's say 20 minutes. Let's set the short-term time to 20 minutes. Well, the cake certainly does look pretty after another 20 minutes, but let's try the skewer test. I'll stick it all the way in. Ooh, it's done! Check that out! Alright. Well, the recipe says to let this cool in the pan for 10 minutes. Actually, it says let it rest in the pan for 10 minutes, and then turn it out on the rack to cool completely for the rest of the time. Well, this definitely goes into the unexpected results category. Look at that. Look at those burn marks. Really, that's just disappointing, I'll tell you. And I didn't even cook it for the total amount of time. The recipe said an hour and 15 minutes, and this is at 50 minutes. Other than that, you know, there's these little teeny tiny burn marks around the sides. If I were frosting it, well, it would still be burned, but still, we have these air pocket holes in quite a few places, and well, I guess if I'm going to bring this to family, I really wouldn't worry about it, because it's, you know, it's family and we can just try it. But I guess I'm going to have to do some more noodling around with this recipe. Just because I was curious about the innards, there's an interesting color pattern here. You know, we have the darker, I guess, you know, overcooked area, and the lighter, you know, I guess more of the target cooked area. So I'm not really sure how to remedy this issue, but I'll try to figure it out, and I'll make a posting about it. In the meantime, I'm going to let it cool, and I'm going to try a piece of it and see how it is.